Alice appeared at Shonda's table without warning. One moment, Shonda sat alone in the corner of the glittering reception hall. The next, a small figure slid into the chair across from her. A girl no older than 8, clutching a thick book like a shield. "Are you safe?" the child asked. Shonda blinked, glancing around the crowded charity gala. "Sweetheart, where's your father?" The girl shook her head. "I'm hiding. They're watching me again. Papa's men. I don't want protection. I just want quiet." Every instinct told Shonda to find security, to do anything except sit here with a lost child. But something in the girl's expression, that careful composure barely concealing desperation, made her pause. "Then sit," Shonda said softly. "No one will bother you here." For 15 minutes, they existed in peaceful silence. The girl read. Shonda worked on her interpretation notes. Then Shonda noticed them. 2 large men in dark suits, moving through the crowd with predatory focus. Security, private security. The girl had noticed too. She'd gone completely still. "Are those the men you're hiding from?" Shonda whispered. The smallest nod. Shonda made a decision that would change everything. She reached across the table, making a small notation in her papers, a gesture of familiarity, as if they'd been together all along. The men approached. "Excuse me, have you seen a young girl?" "You mean Alice?" Shonda kept her tone confused. "She's been with me for 20 minutes. Is something wrong?" The lie came out smooth. She had no idea why she was doing this, lying to armed security for a child she'd just met. But Alice's quiet desperation made her commit. The guard photographed Shonda's face, spoke into his radio. "Mr. Bobroff is on his way." Minutes later, the reception hall went quiet. A man walked toward them, tall, dangerous, commanding. This was Phil Bobroff, and Shonda had just lied to his security team. "Who dares watch my daughter?" he roared. Every guest froze. Every guard snapped to attention. His eyes locked on Shonda. "Who gave you permission?" She met his gaze directly. "She chose me." The entire hall went silent. Victor escorted Shonda through marble corridors, away from the reception, deeper into the estate's private wing. 2 more guards flanked them. No one spoke. They stopped at a heavy oak door. Victor knocked once, then pushed it open. The study was all dark wood and leather. Bookshelves lining the walls, a massive desk dominating the center. 4 armed men positioned themselves at the corners. Shonda stood in the middle, feeling like prey in a trap. The door opened again. Phil Bobroff entered without hurry, closing it behind him with deliberate calm. He'd removed his suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms marked with intricate tattoos. He moved behind the desk but didn't sit, just stood there, studying her with the cold assessment of someone deciding her worth. Name. Real one. Shonda Torres. Occupation. Language tutor. English, Russian, French. She kept her voice steady. I was hired to interpret for tonight's event. Phil's eyes narrowed. I approved the interpretation staff personally. Your name wasn't on the list. I was a last-minute addition, through the agency. He leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. Why was my daughter with you? She sat down at my table. I didn't... What did you tell her? Nothing. She told me she was hiding. I listened. Who sent you? No one sent me. Shonda met his gaze. I'm not whatever you think I am. Phil circled the desk slowly, each step deliberate. My daughter doesn't approach strangers. She doesn't trust easily. She's been trained not to. He stopped directly in front of Shonda. So I'll ask once more. What did you say to make her believe you were safe? I didn't say anything, Shonda replied quietly. I just didn't make her feel like she was in danger. Something flickered in Phil's expression. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition. He turned away, pulled a document from a drawer, slapped it on the desk. Non-disclosure agreement. You sign this. You leave. You never approach my daughter again. You forget this night happened. Shonda looked at the paper but didn't reach for it. I'll sign, she said, if you let me help her. Phil's head snapped toward her. What? Your daughter is terrified, not of strangers, of the life you've built around her. Shonda kept her voice calm despite her racing heart. Let me help her feel safe, even just for an hour. Phil stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You're either bold or stupid. I'm a teacher, Shonda replied, and that little girl needs someone who won't treat her like a liability. The room fell silent. The guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Then Phil did something unexpected. He nodded once. Sharp. Final. 1 hour. Supervised. If you do anything that concerns me, you won't leave this building. He gestured to Victor. Take her to Alice. Victor led Shonda to a smaller room down the hall, a library cozy despite the armed guard posted outside. Alice sat curled in an oversized chair, still clutching her book. When she saw Shonda, her entire face transformed. You came back, Alice whispered, as if she couldn't quite believe it. I did. Shonda sat across from her. Your father said we have an hour. Alice glanced at the door nervously. He's angry with you. Probably, but I'm here anyway. For a moment, Alice just stared. Then she opened her book. They read together. Alice choosing passages from Dostoevsky, Shonda helping with difficult words, but mostly they just talked. Do you have friends at school? Shonda asked gently. Alice shook her head. I have tutors. Papa says school isn't safe. What about playdates? Other children? Papa says I can't trust other children. Their parents might... She trailed off, as if the words were too heavy to say aloud. Shonda's chest tightened. What do you want, Alice? If you could choose anything? Alice looked up, eyes wide with surprise, as if no one had ever asked her that before. I want to go to a park, without guards. I want to read on a bench and watch other kids play. Her voice dropped. I want to feel normal. Then let's practice normal. Shonda gestured to the book. You choose what we read next. Your choice, no one else's. Alice hesitated, then smiled, small but genuine. From the doorway, Phil Bobroff watched. He'd been there for 10 minutes, arms crossed, expression unreadable, watching his daughter laugh, watching her relax in a way he hadn't seen in months, watching Shonda give Alice something he didn't know how to provide, choice. His jaw tightened. When the hour ended, Victor knocked. Time, Miss Torres. Alice's hand shot out, gripping Shonda's arm. No, not yet. Alice, Victor started. Please, Papa. Alice's voice cracked as she looked toward the doorway where Phil stood. Just a little longer. Phil's expression remained cold, but something in his eyes shifted. He glanced at Shonda, then back at his daughter. 30 minutes, he said finally. Alice's grip loosened. Can she come back? Tomorrow? Phil's gaze fixed on Shonda, calculating, assessing, suspicious. We'll see, he said coldly, if she survives the night. 3 days later, Shonda returned. Phil had agreed to supervised sessions, 1 hour, twice weekly, always with guards present. It was progress. Small, controlled, but progress. Alice was reading aloud when the first gunshot shattered the window. Glass exploded inward. Alice screamed. Shonda didn't think. She grabbed the girl and dove under the heavy oak desk, her body covering Alice's completely. Stay down, Shonda whispered, her voice somehow steady despite her racing heart. Don't move. Don't make a sound. More gunshots, shouting in Russian. The library door burst open. Not guards, but men in black tactical gear, weapons raised. Alice trembled beneath her. Shonda pressed closer, making herself a shield. Chaos erupted in the hallway. Bullets, screams, the thunder of boots on marble. Somewhere Phil's voice roared commands. Return fire echoed through the estate. A masked gunman entered the library, scanning. Shonda held her breath, held Alice tighter. The man moved toward the desk. Then Victor appeared in the doorway, firing twice. The gunman dropped. "Stay there!" Victor shouted, then disappeared back into the firefight. It felt like hours. It was probably minutes. Finally, silence. Then footsteps. Heavy, urgent, uneven. The desk shifted as someone crouched beside it. "Alice!" Phil's voice, raw and desperate. "Alice! Papa!" Alice scrambled out from under Shonda's protection, launching herself into Phil's arms. He caught her, crushing her against his chest. His knuckles were bloodied, his shirt torn. A cut above his eyebrow leaked red down his temple. But his eyes, terrified, wild, were locked on his daughter. "You're safe," he breathed. "You're safe." Then he looked at Shonda, still crouched on the floor, shaking. Something in his expression cracked wide open. He reached for her with his free arm, pulling her into the embrace. Fierce, desperate, grateful. Alice between them. Shonda pressed against his shoulder, all three of them breathing hard, alive, together. "Thank you," Phil whispered against Shonda's hair. "Thank you." Hours later, after Alice had finally fallen asleep, Shonda found Phil standing alone on a terrace overlooking the estate grounds. Security teams swept the perimeter below. The threat was contained, but the damage was done. "You should rest," Shonda said softly. Phil didn't turn. "You could have run. When the shooting started, you could have saved yourself." "Not without Alice." He finally looked at her then, exhausted, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you risk—" Shonda stepped closer. "Because she chose me, remember?" Phil stared at her. Then, without warning, he closed the distance between them and kissed her. It was fast, desperate, unexpected, fueled by adrenaline and fear and gratitude and something deeper neither of them had words for yet. When he pulled back, Shonda's mind reeled. Phil started. "Don't," Shonda whispered. "Not tonight." He nodded, stepping away, composing himself. Shonda watched him go, her fingers touching her lips. What had she gotten herself into? "You can't go home." Phil's words the morning after the attack were absolute. Not a suggestion. A command. "The men who attacked us escaped. They know who you are now, where you live." He stood in the doorway of the guest room where Shonda had spent the night. "Until we neutralize the threat, you stay here, protected." Shonda wanted to argue. She had a life, an apartment, independence. But Alice's terrified face flashed in her mind. "How long?" she asked. Phil's jaw tightened. "As long as it takes." 3 days became a week. A week became 2. Shonda moved into a suite on the estate's 2nd floor. Luxurious, guarded, isolated. What started as 1-hour tutoring sessions expanded into entire days. Morning lessons bled into lunch with Alice. Lunch became afternoon reading. Reading became dinner at the family table, just the 3 of them, guards stationed outside. Alice transformed. She laughed more, asked questions, started choosing her own books instead of waiting for approval. Every morning she'd run to Shonda's door, knocking softly until Shonda emerged. "Can we read in the garden today?" Alice would ask, eyes bright with hope. And Shonda never said no. Phil watched. He'd appear in doorways, arms crossed, expression unreadable, watching his daughter bloom, watching Shonda give Alice something he'd tried and failed to provide. Lightness. One evening, Shonda found him in the library after Alice had gone to bed, staring at financial reports he clearly wasn't reading. "She's doing well," Shonda said quietly, entering. Phil glanced up. "Because of you. Because she feels safe." "Safe." He said the word like it was foreign. I've given her walls, guards, protocols, but she was never safe. Not really. He paused. Not until you. Their eyes met. Held. Phil looked away first. The tender moments came without warning. Reaching for the same book, their hands brushing, both pulling back too quickly. Midnight conversations when neither could sleep. Talking softly in the hallway so they wouldn't wake Alice. Phil explaining the impossible balance of protecting his daughter while running an empire built on violence. Shonda sharing pieces of her past, the loneliness, the constant moving, the careful distance she kept from everyone. Why? Phil asked one night. Because getting close means getting hurt, Shonda admitted. Phil's expression softened. I know that feeling. Then came the nightmare. Shonda woke to Alice's screams, raw, terrified, inconsolable. She ran to Alice's room, finding the girl tangled in sheets, sobbing. Shh, sweetheart, I'm here. Shonda gathered Alice into her arms, rocking her gently. You're safe. I've got you. Alice clung to her, shaking. They came back. The bad men. They took you away. I'm right here, not going anywhere. From the doorway, Phil stood frozen, watching Shonda soothe his daughter with an ease he'd never possessed. Eventually, Alice's breathing steadied. Her grip loosened. Will you stay? Alice whispered. Until I fall asleep? Of course. Alice nestled against Shonda's shoulder, her small voice barely audible. You're my safe person, Shonda. My only safe person. The words hung in the quiet room. Phil turned and walked away silently, something breaking inside him with every step. Because his daughter had just said what he'd been too afraid to admit. Shonda had become essential, and that terrified him more than any threat ever could. The photograph arrived at dawn. Victor brought it to Phil's office. Shonda and Alice in the garden, captured through a telephoto lens. On the back, a message in Russian. We know what you treasure now. Phil's blood went cold. The Volkov family, his oldest rivals. They'd been quiet since the attack, but this was a declaration. Pack them up, Phil told Victor. The safe house in the mountains. Now. Within an hour, Shonda and Alice were being hustled into an armored SUV. What's happening? Shonda demanded. You're leaving. Phil's face was stone. Both of you, until this is finished. And you? I'm ending this. His eyes met hers, hard and final. I will not lose either of you. Alice clung to her father, sobbing. Papa, don't leave us. I have to, Malishka. Phil kissed her forehead, voice breaking. To keep you safe. He looked at Shonda. Protect her. You come back, Shonda said fiercely. You hear me? You come back. Phil nodded once, then they were gone. The safe house was remote, buried in dense forest, unmarked, roads, total isolation. Victor and 2 other guards stayed with them. Days crawled by. No phone calls, no updates, just silence. Alice barely ate, barely spoke. She'd curl against Shonda at night, whispering, What if he doesn't come back? He will, Shonda promised, trying to believe it herself. On the 5th day, Victor's radio crackled. His face went pale. What? Shonda demanded. What is it? Victor wouldn't meet her eyes. There was a confrontation. Casualties on both sides. Is Phil? We don't know. The words shattered something inside her. 2 more days passed. Then, late on the 7th night, headlights cut through the darkness. Shonda ran outside. Phil stumbled from the vehicle. Face bruised, shirt dark with dried blood, barely able to stand. But alive. Phil! He collapsed forward. Shonda caught him, his weight nearly taking her down. She held him upright, arms around him, feeling him shake. I'm here, she whispered. You're here. We're all here. Phil's hand found the back of her head, gripping tight. His voice came out raw, broken. You're the reason I survived." And Shonda knew, with terrifying clarity, that everything had changed. They weren't just protector and protected anymore. They were family. They returned to the estate 3 days later. Phil's wounds had been treated, his strength slowly returning. But something fundamental had shifted. He watched Shonda differently now. Not with suspicion or calculation, but with something raw and unguarded. Late one evening, after Alice had gone to bed, Phil found Shonda on the terrace where they'd first kissed. She stood at the railing, looking out over the grounds. "I need to tell you something," Phil said quietly. Shonda turned. His expression was open in a way she'd never seen. Vulnerable, almost afraid. "I'm falling for you." The words came out rough. "Maybe I already have. But Shonda, my world..." He gestured helplessly. "It's darkness, violence, danger, every day. I have no right to drag you into this, to ask you to..." "You're not dragging me anywhere." Shonda stepped closer. "I walked into this myself, remember? The moment I lied to your security, the moment I chose Alice." She paused. "The moment I chose you. You could leave. You should leave. Find someone normal, safe." "I don't want safe." Her voice was steady. "I want this. You. Alice. All of it." Phil stared at her like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "I'm already in too deep to walk away," Shonda continued. "So the question isn't whether I'm staying. The question is, do you want me to?" For a long moment, Phil just looked at her. Then he closed the distance between them, cupping her face in both hands. "More than anything," he whispered. This kiss was different from the first, not desperate or fueled by adrenaline, but slow, intentional, full of promise. When they pulled apart, Phil rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be this. We'll figure it out." The next morning, Alice appeared at breakfast to find Shonda already at the table, not in the guest chair, but in what had always been an empty seat beside Phil. Alice's eyes went wide. "Does this mean..." Phil glanced at Shonda, then back at his daughter. "Would you like Shonda to stay, permanently?" "Yes!" Alice launched herself at Shonda, nearly knocking over her juice. "We can be a real family. Please say yes, please." "Yes," Shonda laughed, hugging the girl tight. "Of course yes." Alice pulled back, looking between them with sudden seriousness. "You love each other?" Phil's hand found Shonda's under the table. "We do." "Good." Alice nodded firmly. "Because I love you both. And families stay together." The days that followed felt almost normal. Breakfast together every morning, Alice chattering about her books while Phil read reports, and Shonda planned lessons. Shared dinners where Phil actually smiled, where Alice told jokes, where Shonda felt like she belonged. Quiet evenings reading in the library, the three of them in comfortable silence. Even the guards adjusted. Victor started greeting Shonda with respect rather than suspicion. Security protocols began including her as a protected family member, not just a temporary guest. One night after Alice was asleep, Phil pulled Shonda close on the library sofa. "I promise you," he said quietly, "whatever it takes, whoever threatens us, I will protect this, protect you both, no matter the cost." Shonda kissed him softly. "I know." They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other, believing they'd found peace. Then Victor entered, his expression grim. "Sir, a message just arrived." He handed Phil a sealed envelope. Phil opened it, read. His face went stone cold. "What?" Shonda asked. "What is it?" Phil's jaw clenched as he looked up, fury and fear warring in his eyes. "The Volkov family, they're demanding I choose." His voice was tight. "Step down from leadership, give them control of my territories, or they'll come for you and Alice." He handed her the note. The final line made Shonda's blood run cold. Phil Bobrov must choose, power or family. He cannot have both. Shonda stared at the note, her hands trembling. The words were simple, but the meaning was catastrophic. Phil rose slowly, the paper crumpling in his fist. "I won't let them touch you," he said. "Or Alice." "Phil, what are you going to do?" He didn't answer, not right away. Instead, he crossed the room, pacing once, twice, like a caged animal deciding whether to fight or flee. Finally, he stopped, exhaling a bitter breath. "I need to face them." Shonda stepped toward him. "Alone?" "Yes." She grabbed his arm. "Phil, that's exactly what they want." "They want me cornered," he corrected, voice low. "Not dead, not yet. Volkov wants to see if I'll bend." His jaw clenched. He's about to find out. The meeting was arranged before dawn. A warehouse on the harbor, neutral ground, surrounded by the sea, impossible to ambush without being seen. Shonda wasn't allowed to go, though she begged him. Phil kissed her forehead before leaving, lingering like he didn't want to pull away. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I swear it." Hours later, the warehouse echoed with the sound of boots and tension. Rival soldiers lined the walls, weapons visible but holstered. Volkov stepped forward, a tall, sharp-featured man who wore his cruelty like a tailored suit. "Phil Bobroff," Volkov greeted. "I expected you to hide behind your men." Phil didn't flinch. "You threatened my family. I don't hide from threats." Volkov raised a brow. "Then choose. Power or the woman. Power or the girl. You know the price." Phil's nails dug into his palms. "You're right. I do." He paused, eyes hardening with resolve. "I choose my family." A ripple of shock passed through the room. Even some of Phil's own men stiffened. Volkov smiled slowly, relishing the moment. "Then step aside, publicly, sign everything over, your territories, your alliances, your routes." Phil's voice dropped to a lethal calm. "You touch them, you don't get anything. You walk out of here with a war you can't win." Volkov studied him, and nodded once. "Then step down, Bobroff. Tonight." Returning to the estate, Phil looked older, like the choice had carved years out of him. Shonda rushed into the entry hall when she heard the doors open. "Are you okay? What happened?" Phil took her hands. "I'm giving it up. All of it." Shonda blinked. "Phil, that's everything you've built." "No." He shook his head softly. "Everything I built is upstairs, sleeping with her stuffed rabbit, and standing right in front of me." For a moment, her eyes stung. The next 2 days were chaos wrapped in betrayal. Phil gathered his captains, informing them he was stepping down. Some responded with loyalty, offering their support. Others reacted with rage. Grigori, one of the longest-serving men, exploded first. "You're abandoning us for a woman?" he snarled. "For a teacher?" Before anyone could move, Phil slammed him back against the wall, forearm pressing into his throat. "I'm choosing a life," he growled. "The first real one I've ever had. If you can't respect that, leave." Grigori left. Others followed, but enough stayed to keep the transition stable. Phil transferred territories to 2 trusted allies, gave Victor control of the estate's security, and publicly announced the power shift. The criminal world buzzed with disbelief, but no one dared challenge him as long as Victor's men guarded the perimeter. Through every confrontation, every sleepless hour, Shonda never left his side. She stood behind him in meetings, waited outside every dangerous room, put her hand on his back when his composure faltered. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered once, when he looked ready to break. "Remember?" He did. On the final night of his reign, after signing the last of the transfer documents, Phil walked into the garden behind the estate. Shonda was there, arms folded against the cool breeze. "It's done," he said quietly. She turned. "How do you feel?" "Free," he admitted, terrified, but free. He stepped closer, eyes softening. I did it for Alice. She deserves a life without gunfire in the distance, without guards shadowing her every step. He paused. And I did it for you. Shonda swallowed. Phil, I want a normal life. Or as close as I can get. He reached into his pocket, suddenly uncertain. I want mornings with you, dinners with Alice, school recitals, vacations, arguments over stupid things like burnt toast. He opened a small velvet box, hands trembling. Shonda, will you build that life with me? Will you marry me? Her breath caught. For a moment she could only stare at the ring. Simple, elegant, nothing like the man he used to be. Then she looked up, eyes full. Yes, she whispered. Of course, yes. Phil exhaled shakily, pulling her into his arms, holding her like she was the first decision he'd ever made for himself. This time, she was. The garden lanterns swayed gently in the night breeze as Phil held Shonda close, the glow softening every scar, every shadow of the life he had just walked away from. Her yes lingered in the air like the first breath of a new world, light, fragile, full of promise. That night became the last chapter of the life they once knew, and the first page of the one they would build. 10 years later, the morning sun spilled over a quiet suburban neighborhood far from the estate, far from the echoes of gunfire and whispered threats. Their home, white-painted brick, wide porch, flowers Alice insisted on planting every spring, sat on a peaceful street, where children biked freely and neighbors waved casually, having no idea who Phil Bobroff used to be. Inside, the scent of pancakes drifted through the kitchen. Mom! Alice's voice rang from the staircase, older now, warm and confident, 16, with her father's steely gaze but Shonda's smile. Dad's burning breakfast again. No, I'm not, Phil called back, even though the smoke alarm chirped accusingly above him. Shonda laughed, stepping into the kitchen with their youngest, 5-year-old Noah, clinging to her hand. Noah, all curls and soft cheeks, blinked around sleepily. Alice dropped into a chair at the table. Mom, you should have seen him. He flipped a pancake so high it hit the ceiling. Phil turned, spatula in hand, feigning outrage. That's called technique. No, Alice countered. That's called a fire hazard. Shonda kissed his cheek as she passed. And this is why you're not allowed near the stove unsupervised. Phil grumbled, but he hugged her from behind anyway, sliding his arms around her waist in a way that still made her heart flutter. Peace looked good on him. It looked good on all of them. Later that afternoon, sunlight filtered through the curtains as Shonda settled on the living room couch with a book. Alice wandered in, holding an old photo album. One Shonda kept tucked away on the highest shelf, containing pieces of the life Phil no longer spoke about. Mom, can you tell me again? Alice asked, sitting beside her. The story of the night we met. Shonda blinked, surprised. You've heard it 100 times. Alice shrugged, flipping the album open. I want to hear it again. Your version. Phil entered the room quietly, pausing behind them. Shonda felt rather than saw him sit in the armchair nearby. He loved this story too. Loved hearing it through Shonda's voice. She took a breath. All right, she began softly. It was raining that night, remember? And I was just a teacher trying to return a little girl I found in the parking lot. Lost, scared, soaking wet. I wasn't that soaked, Alice muttered with a grin. You absolutely were, Shonda teased. Your hair was plastered to your face and you were shivering so hard I thought you'd crack a tooth. Phil chuckled under his breath. And then, Shonda continued, I followed you home, straight into a mansion guarded by men who looked like they wrestled bears for a living. Alice giggled. Victor? Especially Victor, Shonda agreed. And there your father stood, furious, terrifying, so ready to tear the world apart. Phil cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed. I wasn't that bad. You growled at me, Shonda reminded him. One time. Phil, she said amused. You growled my name. Alice laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch. When she caught her breath, she leaned in closer. And then what happened? Shonda smiled softly at the memory. Then you grabbed my hand, looked up at your father with those big eyes and said, She's my teacher, Alice recited with pride. Be nice. Phil rubbed his forehead. You made me look ridiculous in front of 12 armed guards. Alice smirked. And I'd do it again. They all laughed, the kind of laughter that came easily now. Then Phil spoke, quietly, seriously. The day she chose you, he said to Alice, we all changed. Alice's smile softened. Noah toddled in then, dragging a stuffed lion by the tail. He crawled into Alice's lap, and she wrapped an arm around him automatically, the practiced gesture of a big sister who'd grown up in a home with love instead of fear. Tell it again, Noah demanded. Alice ruffled his curls. No, buddy, you tell it this time. Noah frowned. I don't know it. Alice leaned down, voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. It goes like this, she told him. My father roared, but her reply silenced the whole room. Phil hid a smile behind his hand. Shonda met Alice's eyes, a warmth blooming in her chest. Is that how you tell it now? Alice nodded. Because it's true. You didn't flinch. You didn't back down. You just looked at him and told him the truth. And what truth was that? Phil asked, watching them both. Alice touched Shonda's hand. That she wasn't leaving me. Ever. Silence settled over the room. Soft, full, emotional. Years had passed. Lives had changed. But that moment, the night in the hallway, the soaked little girl, the dangerous man who found his heart again, was the thread that tied their entire world together. Shonda leaned back against Phil's legs as he rested a hand on her shoulder. Alice smiled at them both, and Noah curled contentedly between them. Sometimes, life didn't just come full circle. Sometimes, it came home. Shonda looked around her, at Phil, at Alice, at Noah, at the life built from one impossible choice. Her voice dropped to a whisper, repeating the words that started it all. She chose me, Shonda whispered, and I chose her too. You just walked through years of pain, loyalty, and sacrifice with Shonda, Phil, and Alice. Don't leave their world without hitting follow. They gave you their story. The least you can give back is a tap.